Good afternoon and welcome back to the GT Cup Championship here at Donington Park, of course, as we get ready for the pit stop race, the first of the two pit stop races that we have this weekend. If you haven't joined us for a pit stop race before, well, about halfway point in the race, everyone has to make a pit stop. Simple as that. Change your fuel, tyres, drivers, of course, for those that have driver swaps, get back out on the racetrack and go and hunt down the victory. If you didn't join us for the race earlier on, it was a dominant performance, of course, from the two Lamborghini Super Trofeos for Top Cats Racing. Of course, it was the number 3 that ended up taking victory at the end of the race after a brilliant performance, basically all the way throughout. However, it was the number 2, the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rowling's car, that was able to work its way from the rear of the field all the way up into second place, finishing just 1 second behind the race-winning car of Warren Gilbert and Fraser Fenwick. Of course, what that means is they've finished that race. They will be starting from first and second in this race. It will be the number 2 car of Charlotte Gilbert, of course, and Tom Rawlings that will be starting from the pole position alongside the number 3. So you can see them there lining up at the front of the field. They have been the class of the field this weekend thus far and look very, very strong for things in the championship at the moment as well. It's been, like I say, a very impressive start to the weekend, and basically what that's done is in the overall championship, which is the one that is realistically is the closest between all the championships, because of how things went in the previous race for Charlotte Gilbert and for Tom Rawlings. They've pulled out a fair 33-point lead now over the ABBA racing car that Ian Logie and Richard Neary typically drive, that's not in action for this weekend's racing. This is a look into the pit lane. I did see this on the starting grid. The Jolt Racing Team McLaren that was originally slated to take part in the previous race. Then we got told it was being pulled out for the Saturday and that we'd maybe see it racing on the Sunday. Alas, it does seem as though it is back and ready to go racing here. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. We will see Jolt Racing back out on the circuit. That said, if there has been a technical issue after qualifying, it may not be at full racing speed by the time we finish with today. There may be more so just getting it ready for tomorrow's proceedings, where again they'll have to qualify and then do the 2 races as we see here. When it comes to that pit stop, by the way, in the middle of the race, if you've never joined us before, there is 2 groups of drivers, and I'll roll through the teams that are in those 2 groups in a second, but effectively they pit at different points in the race. It's within a 6-minute window, if I remember correctly, where they come into the pit lane. So it's between the 29th and 35th minute and between the 24th and 29th minute. I'll talk about that in a second though, because it is time to talk about the grid for the race. Of course, it will be those 2 Top Cats racing cars starting from first and second position. It'll be the Charlotte Gilbert driven car that will be starting from the pole position, the Warren Gilbert driven car that starts from second place, if you want to know your difference between your 2 Gilberts there. In third position though, it's the GCat racing car that was attacking the rear end of the Top Cats Racing number 3 towards the early part of the race. They'll be starting from third position with Walpole Racing in that track-focused KTM starting from the 4th position. Back on row number 3 is where we'll find the Bailey and Brabham driven Kendall Developments Lamborghini. They'll be starting this one from 5th position with Frasetti starting from 6th position. Neza and Porter behind the wheel. Solid drive in the previous race from them. Of course, the McLaren Artura for Paddock Motorsports, Orant and Plowman starting from 7th position, with Keith Bush starting the Parker Racing Porsche from 8th position. The final few rows of the grid, Murphy had problems in the race, had to return to pit lane. The Simpson Motorsport car of KM Ridge, those went a few laps down after dealing with a few problems. Chamberlain had their fair share of problems as well in the KTR Developments car, and we did not see Jolt Racing's 370 McLaren Artura out on the circuit for Williams and Ingram in the previous race. So curious to see how they're going to get along in this one. And as you can see the cars here, if you've got a swift eye, You can count there's 12 cars on our screen, 1 pace car, 11 GTs of varying description, and that is because, in fact, there might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There might be 10 of them. Never mind. Maybe my maths is not so great, but it's because the 370 starting from the pit lane was the entire point of where I was going with that one. But maybe my eyes aren't swift enough. But either way, they'll work their way down into the final complex where they'll all get themselves ready for the race. What I was going to say, yes, so for this, there's a pit window between the 24th and 29th minute. That's when Group 1 will be in the pit lane, and then they'll be between the 29th and 35th minute. That's when Group 2 will be in the pit lane. I will update you as to who is in which group in a few moments' time, of course, as we get ready to go racing on this Saturday afternoon for the endurance race. Of course, for Top Cat Racing, it is looking like it could well be a victory at the end of the day, unless things go slightly skew-if throughout the race. Do remember they've got slightly longer pit stops and such to take as well, so there's plenty more to deal with. They'll work their way back out, though, onto the Wheatcroft Straight to the start-finish and to racing here at Donington Park as we head down to the first corner. It is going to be the number 2 then continuing to lead as they start from pole position and hold the race lead down to the first corner. Good move to the inside for the GCAT racing car that's made its way up into second position. That is the silver and blue Porsche that's just got past one of the Top Cat Racing Lamborghini Super Trofeos. You've got the KTM just going around the outside there. That's the track-focused car, of course, of Tom Walpole. Just trying to keep that Aston Martin, the GTH car, at bay in their embroiled fight as they head out through the old hairpin and now up the hill towards the likes of McLean's, the likes of Coppice. Slightly wider line coming in there from the number 3 car. Of course, that one from the Top Cats Racing team. Just going a little bit wide in McLean's, but nothing too major, as they now work their way round. Big lead already coming in the opening stages from the number 2 car, the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings car, as they hold probably close to a second margin as they work their way down to the brakes, heading into the Fogarty S. But of course, the Melbourne hairpin, they'll work their way around that, and I will say the Porsche's keeping up at the moment, as is that Lamborghini that's worked its way. That's the Bailey Brabham car, of course, the Kendall Developments car. I will say then, based on the speed at the start of this race, might well be David Brabham behind the wheel of that Lamborghini. They'd had a couple of struggles when it came to pace in the previous race. Certainly not showing those kind of struggles right now as they try and chase down the Super Trofeo at the moment that currently runs in 3rd position. That's the number 3 of the Top Cats Racing cars, of course, that's dropped back behind the Jennings and Caton driven Porsche at the moment. Got the KTM there of Walpole then up into 5th position. The GTH battle for GTH lead between Neza and Porter's number 9 Aston Martin and the number 11 McLaren Artura, the Oron and Plowman car. Of course, I don't know exactly who's behind the wheel at these given moments. We will update you as the race unfolds. Huge amount of pressure then coming onto the shoulders of this Lamborghini Super Trofeo as the number 33 GCAT racing car is on the attack. Definitely fancies working its way through pretty sharpish. They did win both of the endurance races earlier on in the season, did the GCAT racing team in that Porsche when we came racing here at Donington. Of course, that was at Donington National, not the Grand Prix, Luke, but still, you know, it shows they've got good form around here. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So that GCAT racing car should be in a pretty handy stead. They finished in the podium in the opening race, which is obviously the opening race of the season, then had 2 victories, finished a little bit further down in the second of these sprint races, so the 4th race of the weekend, but could well be in good stead to go and chase down the Lamborghini Super Trofeo that leads the race at the moment and maybe go after a victory. Certainly a lot closer than what we saw in the sprint race a little bit earlier on. As you can see, the KTM in the background starting to feel basically the pressure because that Aston Martin's not too far behind. You can see Chamberlain there working to the inside. Unfortunately, didn't really take part in the previous race. I saw the car driving around. I do also love me a bit of a Porsche 935, don't get me wrong. Yeah, obviously in that Group 5-esque, oh, I love Group 5 cars, that's so good. Yeah, in that kind of vein, trying to keep up at the moment with the rear end of that McLaren Artura. Did not take part in the previous race. There's the fire breathing coming from the rear end of the car as it worked its way up the hill to the inside and gets itself past the McLaren Artura of the Paddock Motorsports team. So a good move there from Chamberlain, just using the pace, power and grunt. As much as there might not be, it looks like there's a lot of downforce on it. It's the very like 1970s, 1980s-esque downforce, where it looks like there's a lot, and there really kind of isn't. They move around an awful lot, mostly courtesy of the unbelievable amount of grunt coming out of that fire-breathing engine. Heading now down into the Fog ES, and Chamberlain's starting to close away. I've also, by the way, it sounds fantastic as they're closing up right now to the rear end of that Aston Martin, the race-leading GTH car. There's a switch, though, for third position on the road. The 28, driven by Brabham at the moment, to the inside, sneaking its way through into third place. So that will be a solid move for the Kendall Developments car, as they work now up into the podium positions at the moment, as the race winners of a few hours ago have to settle for fourth. They're going backwards at the moment, though, for the race lead. It is the Charlotte Gilbert, Tom Rawlings car that set the fastest lap of the race and has the pace of the field, 0.8 of a second clear of the Jennings Caton Porsche 911 car at the moment. But I will say that GCAT racing car is looking pretty quick and consistent. You saw them both go through the foreground, a shot there showing how close they are. Same as how close this battle is as well, as we head over at McLean's, then crest the top of the hill. Of course, down in pit lane, other drivers such looking at all of the data and discussing with all the timekeeping, with all the marshals of their team as well. I'm sure it's quite, as much as you're not in the car, there's still a fairly frantic time as you try and prepare for your stints, or keep an eye on your drivers, or regardless of the amount of roles that all these drivers and teams play throughout the fields these days. A little bit deep on the brakes there from the 28 Kendall Developments car, just a touch deep, taking the defensive line from the Lamborghini Super Trofeo behind them as they try and fend off again. These two, whilst they look very, very similar, fairly different when it comes to specification of car. One of them is effectively, it's more of a standardized GT3 car, which is the one the black and yellow. It's not quite standard, but it's basically it's more of a typical GT3 car, whereas the Lamborghini Super Trofeo has a different level of downforce, a different level of power. It's more subtle, like it's not not as a ridiculous jump as some will have you say, but it's still definitely noticeable with how they race. I mean, you can even stare at one and the other. You've got that big roof scoop. That's how you really know it's a Super Trofeo spec'd Lamborghini. That enormous roof scoop. You've got an air intake on the front as well, basically in the middle of the bonnet, and the rear wing is ever so slightly different. Looks a bit more. Well, it's curved on the end plates. Looks a little bit more like I guess like a fighter jet. I really like a Super Trofeo. I think they look really cool. But alas, tis what it is. As my inner child would very much go for a Super Trofeo rather than a standard GT3 Huracan. But that is me. And at the moment, it is going on the attack, trying to retake over third position at the moment. And looking like it's definitely got the pace in order to do so. Few battles in all this. Of course, you've got the race leaders, which are separated by 0.6 of a second. Another deep run coming in from that Kendall Developments car. And here we go then. Can we see the move from the Top Cats number 3 to the outside, heading into the final corner? That's going to be a big commitment on the brakes. Can they make that one stick? Not really. Surely there's not the downforce and grip out there. Definitely going to give it a good go. Now they're joined, though, by the Porsche 935 that Chamberlain's behind the wheel of. Also navigating the lap traffic there of the Simpsons Motorsports GTH car. There comes the move to the inside. So Top Cats retake over third position in the race. And soon enough, they're going to have the CTR Development Porsche 935 of Chamberlain joining them in this fight, right on the rear end. I'm not going to lie, this weekend I don't think I was going to be talking about two different types of Lamborghini fighting each other, joined by a Porsche 935. But hey, we take what we can get. Love seeing it out on the circuit, as they are most certainly close. So Chamberlain at the moment very much not missing the previous race, as much as they didn't do any laps in the previous race, clearly not costing them any track time. Big backfire as they dropped a gear to head into Coppice, and let's see what the straight line speed is like as it'll close up to the rear end of the 28, heading down the Starkey straight to the inside into the fog at ES. Let's see what the commitment's like. Plenty there, as my goodness me, that is quite a level of commitment coming in from Richard Chamberlain to clear over the Kendall Developments Lamborghini, now up into 4th position then. So it's Top Cats leading the race. It is the GCat Racing Porsche in 2nd position. It's then Top Cats once again in 3rd position before we get to the CTR Developments car in 3rd, and then of course the number 28 Kendall Developments car that currently runs in of course 5th position at the moment, as they all switch and chop and change around. There comes the move to the inside. That's a big one. Oh, and it's too big. He's ended up in the gravel trap. It's way too deep on the brakes there, unfortunately, for Richard Chamberlain. And that car will be stuck in the gravel. That may require a safety car, because I don't think the total rear-wheel drive car, I don't think that car is going anywhere anytime soon. And it's also those Group 5S cars. They're so low to the ground. There's absolutely no clearance underneath. And that will almost certainly require some form of assistance to get out of the gravel trap. Big drama then in this race. I did think it was a little bit too deep on the brakes. It was well read by the Top Cats number 3. Just to kind of give the room to the inside and not try and force the issue. This is back up to our race leaders though. It's the Top Cats number 2, and the safety car has just been deployed then. So for the first time this weekend, the safety car will be taking a venture out to the circuit. You can see the yellow flags being waved by the marshals then, so the race will be neutralised. Fastest lap of the race came in from the Charlotte Gilbert's Tom Rawlings car that leads this race by 0.7 of a second, but now everything starts to calm down. Now, as much as there is a required pit stop in this race, they can't just do it now. They all have windows. We'll talk about that in a moment. Because first, I'll update you with the order of the field. That's why. What I was going to say, so we've got the Top Cats racing car, the number 2 that is leading the way. In 2nd position, it is the number 33 GCat racing car of Jennings and Caton. Then in 3rd place, it is the number 3 Top Cats racing car of Gilbert and Fenwick. Then, of course, in 4th place, we've got the Bailey Brabham driven number 28 Kendall Developments car. Then, of course, in 5th position, it's the number 13 car, the track-focused KTM that Tom Walpole's behind the wheel of at the moment. Then we have our GTH leader that's running in 6th position overall. That is the number 9 Fossetti Motorsports car, Nether Importer behind the wheel. Confirmation of the safety car just there on your screen. Directly behind them, it will be the Oren Plowman McLaren Artura of Paddock Motorsport. So a tight fight. There is the battle between that KTM that I was talking about, the track-focused car, and there is a race leader in the GTH category, so they're going to have added pressure from the other GTH car of the Paddock Motorsports team that will be directly behind them once we get this race back underway. Behind that will be the number 72 Woodrow Motorsports. That is the BMW M3 GTR. Of course, if you've played Need for Speed Most Wanted back in the day, you'll recognise that car from about 3,000 miles away. Of course, Chris Murphy behind the wheel of that one. Keith Bush will be the next driver on the road in 9th position at the moment in the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. That is, of course, the Team Parker Racing. And then, of course, in 11th position, a lap down at the moment, unfortunately, is the K and Ridge-driven BMW in the GTH category, the number 21 Simpson Motorsports car. Does mean, unfortunately, the Williams and Ingram-driven car, the 370 of Jolt Racing, as much as we said it was pulled out for the weekend, it's not been able to make its way back out onto the racetrack. So, I said earlier on in the race that there is 2 groups that require pit stops. Everyone requires pit stops. Let me clarify that. Everyone requires a pit stop in this race, but there's 2 separate groups. And as far as I will know, It's basically to stop pit lane from being too busy at any given time. The Group 1 will be pitting between the 24th and 29th minute of the race, and the second group will be between the 29th and 35th minute. So for the first group, their pit lane will open potentially the next lap. Let's see if I can find out who is in each given group, at least according to where they went out in qualifying, which I'm pretty sure is where it's adjudicated, where it's pulled from. The Top Cat's number 3. The GCAT Racing, oh, there we go. The number 5 is back out onto the circuit. There's another one that's in that group, by the way. This is Group 1, as far as I'm aware. The number 3 Top Cat's Racing car then, so the team that's in 3rd position at the moment. The number 33 GCAT Racing car, the team that's in 2nd place at the moment. The Kendall Developments number 28, the team that's in 4th at the moment. My goodness me. Then it's the number 13 Track Focused car, the team that's in 5th place, and then it's Team Parker Racing, Keith Bush, 9th place for them at the moment. The Woodrow Motorsports car of Chris Murphy, that's down in 8th, and of course the car that's just come back out onto the racetrack there, CTI Developments, Richard Chamberlain. I believe those are the cars that are in Group 1, which means Group 2 is the Forsetti Motorsports car, the Paddock Motorsports car, the Simpson Motorsports car, and the the Woodrow car is in that as well. On this list, it doesn't show me as to which group the number 2's in. I believe it will be the first group. I think they had a few struggles in qualifying, but I do believe they will be in the first group that I listed earlier. So those should be in the pit lane relatively soon. And to be perfectly honest, I think with the time in the race, I'm pretty sure, hold on, let me grab my maths again and the big calculator that comes with it. The pit lane should be opening, not now because we're only 15 minutes into the race. Depends on how long the safety car is going to be out for. Now they've rescued the car, probably not going to be done under safety car, because safety car should come in pretty soon. But we're not long away from these drivers and teams being able to come into the pit lane. If it's the 24th to 29th minute for them, so that is it's not for 10 minutes basically, and then they'll be able to come into the pit lane and service their cars and tick off their driver swaps. Obviously, if you've got your lead driver in the car right now, you want to be leaving that to as late in the window as possible. I did see the safety car lights. I believe we're out, and so everyone will remain single file. There's no too wide restarts or anything like that. It's we're not in crazy town here. Almost a crash there. That's a bit scary. There's Chamberlain working her way back into the pit lane. That was genuinely nearly a crash, I think, between... Oh, there's nearly a crash again! Oh, my goodness me. The McLaren Artura, the number 11 car, nearly absolutely biffed it into the rear end of the race leading in the GTH, who then also nearly dropped it into the back of the KTM as well. My goodness, that was very scary and very easy to do. The concertina effect can be brutal around here. Green flag's back in the air then, safety car's back into the pit lane, and the race is back underway. So you can see Chamberlain there into the pit lane on the right-hand side, so has had a little bit of fun out there on the circuit, but I think that day might be done for the Porsche 935 into the garage. It is going to go. And forwards as well, so it's not going to be easy to turn that one around. I think that one is toast. We won't see that one back out, at least not on this Saturday afternoon. We'll have to see it on Sunday morning when we go racing. Battle between the track-focused KTM at the moment and the Forsetti Motorsports Aston Martin. Of course, the GTH lead on the line here between the number 9 and the number 11. There is a look at the Porsche 935 into the pit lane, and you can see all the gravel as well that is spewed out even in this small period. And look at the size of that diffuser. What a car. What an absolutely fantastic car. Speaking of cars, there's one. That's a great one as well. Love the M3 GTR that is actually closing right up to the rear end of this battle at the moment between Walpole, of course, and the track-focused car. That's currently in 5th position at the moment. The two GTH cars that are battling for the GTH lead, and, of course, Chris Murphy, who's currently running in 8th position at the moment. So, pretty tight fight there as Forsetti are able to keep Paddock Motorsports at bay. There's a look to the inside, just they're trying to find their way past this KTM. But at the moment, no way to make that move stick. Much tighter fights in this race than we had in the sprint earlier on in the day, which is great to see. Great for the drivers, great for the fans here. A little bit deep on the brakes, there goes the Aston Martin. Should be able to find the apex a little bit late. You can run a little wider at Goddard's. You don't necessarily have to follow that extremely tight line on the inside as what you'll see in higher downforce cars, whether you really do need to hold that tight line. There comes a move to the inside from Murphy. Chris Murphy trying to work his way past the Paddock Motorsports GTH car. Speaking of moves from GTHs, once again the run through Redgate much better in the hands of the Forsetti Motorsports car. That of course we've got Neza and Porter behind the wheel. Mikey Porter I think was the driver that was in the car a little bit earlier on in the day. Big slide there going through the old hairpin as we've got 31 minutes 20 seconds left to go in this race. We're quick approaching the pit stops, 20 minutes nearly complete in the race. In 5 minutes time we'll have the pit stops open for the first group. Group 1 is the GT Open cars, so the GTO cars, the GT3s and the GTCs. So the GTOs are the ones that are highlighted in light blue, the GT3s are the ones that are highlighted in dark blue, and the GTCs, I don't think, have we got any GTCs in this? Yeah, oh no, the GTOs are the greens, the GTCs are the light blues, and then the GT3s are the dark blues. So they're in Group 1. There we go. My goodness, my brain's not there, is it? They'll be the ones that have entered the pit lane for the first time. We still have a tight battle for the race lead, but it is going to be the Top Cats Racing team, the number 2, that's able to hang on for it at the moment as they've pulled out a 1.5 second lead at the moment over the number 33 GCat Racing car. But let's wait until the pit stops and see how quickly things change. You've got basically success penalties when it comes into the pit lane. We'll talk about that in a moment. Here comes the look to the outside from Chris Murphy. Just trying to send it in. Can't go for it in that BMW M3 GTR, so has to settle behind the McLaren Artura, the Paddock Motorsports Club. And cannot find their way past. Heading down the hill through the craners, not using as much of the curb as what you see from that Artura. They're built pretty tough. The GTHs, this modern era of GT racing car, they're certainly not fragile, mostly because all the touring car drivers have moved into GT racing, and they're not gentle when it comes to track surface. There is this look at the size of the race lead. So clearly, the number 2 has restarted this race very nicely in that Lamborghini Super Trofeo and has pulled out a margin that's closer to 2 seconds now, probably over, well, comfortably over 2 seconds now in favour of our race leader at present. You hear the scream of the flat 6 there as they depart the Melbourne hairpin. But at the moment, let's see what the gap is as they cross the line. Top Cats were leading by 1.5 seconds. Looks like it's close to 2.5 seconds as they both cross the line and hit the stripe with 29 minutes left to go in the race. It's 2.1 in favour of Top Cats Racing and the championship leaders at the moment in the overall standings. They've pulled out that margin even further. The gap for the championship lead in the overall has gone out to 33 points for Top Cats Racing over ABBA, who aren't here. At least not today. No, certainly not here. 33 points. It is growing and growing and growing. It's going to be much, much larger. And after this, we really don't have long to go in the championship. And by not long, I mean we have 1 round to go in the championship, and that'll be at Snetterton, the 5th and 6th of October. Time is running out as we have just 3 days left after this of the championship. And at the moment, they've taken the full advantage of ABBA Racing not being here to run away. They had a 2nd place in the previous race and they're looking good at the moment. But again, as we always know with GT Cup and GT racing in general, when there's a pit stop involved, do not judge a race until after the pit stops. The pit stops change absolutely everything when it comes to the GT or any form of GT racing. I was saying about success penalties before we get into the pit stops, because we've got 2 minutes and 50 seconds before the pit stops even remotely open. And I'll read you the quote just in case you've never joined us before. Success seconds are based on the results of each class or group from the first pit stop race and subsequent races thereafter. So basically it's as the season's gone on. These success seconds will be allocated at the next pit stop race that the car and drivers start. Drivers and cars finishing outside of the top 3 will not have success seconds applied to their next pit stop. Success seconds are not cumulative, so they don't build up. And basically, the team and driver that finished in first will have 10 seconds. As you see already, driver swaps ready to go. As they're all getting themselves ready. That is for our race leader, so that's Tom Rawlings, who'll be jumping in for Charlotte Gilbert, who's currently behind the wheel then. It's 20 seconds for the, an additional 20 seconds for the team that's first in each group, 15 seconds for the team that's second in each group, and 10 seconds for the team that's third in each group. And obviously group, it means category. It is confusing, but basically the teams that win the most and that are doing the best, they have to stop for 20 seconds longer. And the teams that are doing slightly worse than them, but still better than everyone else, have to stop for 15 seconds longer, etc. for the top 3. So I could have just done one more, but whatever. We'll talk about it later. It does seem as though a lot of those drivers and a lot of those teams are ready to take over almost immediately. So I'm assuming they are expecting their cars to be in the pit lane next lap. We still see the number, well, I see the number 11 now. The number 2, I do not believe is in pit lane. I think the 33 might have come down to the pit lane based on that 4.3 second margin, but it might have just been the pace coming out from that Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Charlotte Gilbert at the moment. There, however, is the 28 Kendall Performance car into the pit, sorry, Kendall Developments car into the pit lane. So there is going to be a driver swap for them. Now, that is fine. It would have looked like it was close coming into pit lane, but I will say when it comes to the requirement on time, remember it's it's between the 24th minute of the race, which we're currently in, and the 29th minute in the pit lane, and that is defined by when they come into pit lane. Right, so it's basically that timer starts the second that you hit the entrance of pit lane. So if it's not the start of the lap, it's not when you get into your box, it's right at the start of pit lane, and they would have been very close, within seconds, in it, but they would have been comfortably under that 24th minute. I suspect we'll see Charlotte Gilbert into the pit lane that we're currently looking at here. See if she'll work her way in and hand over to Tom Rawlings. It's perfectly halfway in this race now, and there we go. She's straight into the pit lane. Pretty aggressive and pretty quick into the pit lane. Much more aggressive, much more quick than the GCAT racing car that's just come in directly behind them. Into the box they'll go, and there is also a mandatory pit stop time. So you'll see sometimes they're not looking like super rushed, like they're running around or anything like that. That is a safety thing. There is a minimum pit stop time. It depends on how your drivers are at the moment. So, for example, the Lamborghini we saw in, not the Super Trofeos, the Kendall Developments one, because they have a pro driver in David Brabham, their pit stops at a slightly different amount of time than those that don't have a pro driver. Basically, the pro and sporting pairings, they are 85 seconds as a mandatory pit stops. A pro sporting and a sporting driver, complicated as to how they define all that, so I'm not going to go into it. That's an 80-second mandatory pit stop time. And then if you're just a sporting driver, i.e. you're not being paid to be here, you're paying, you're a customer, whatever. If you're a sporting driver and a sporting driver, so they're sporting pairings, then it's a 60-second mandatory pit stop time. There are a few drivers, of course, like I said, because David Brabham is in that car, who's, as a pro driver, he's paid by the team to be here as that sense, then their mandatory pit stop time is 85 seconds. Whereas there are some teams where they're just basically mates that come out here racing, probably a little bit less than that, but you know what I mean. They'll be there for a 60-second mandatory pit stop time, so they gain 25 seconds on those pro drivers in the pit stop to try and encourage the race. I would read through the reorder at the moment, but of course, as we're waiting for everyone to come into the pit lane, it's completely pointless at the moment. There is Tom Rawlings behind the wheel of the number 2, about to go a lap down. Maybe not, of course, because the number 3 is into the pit lane. There is the GCAT racing car already out of pit lane. Do you remember that was in pit lane earlier on? But I believe it's because it's a sporting and a sporting pairing between the two of them, at least according to my sheet anyway. And so their pit stop will be 20 seconds less than the Top Cats racing car, which is why they've come out as the race, well, as what will become the race leaders. Most likely, anyway. There's Tom Walpole, who, of course, there is no driver swap in that car because it's just a single driver entry. That's fine within the rules of GT Cup because, again, you've still got the mandatory pit stop time. So they can check everything, they can change tyres if they want to, although I wouldn't recommend changing tyres. Effectively, they get given, I think it's 2 sets of tyres per day. For this, so you typically qualify and then use one in race 1, and then you'd use the other in today's race or in this afternoon's race, allowing things to settle. It could be a big lead, by the way, for the GCAT racing car at the moment. You can see the Lamborghini Super Trofeo here, the number 2 that Tom Rawlings is behind the wheel of, and of course finished 2nd earlier on in the day. Once they're done with the pit stops, we'll give you the order and see exactly where we are. Nearly half an hour through this race. Do remember, of course, that as they work their way around the pit stop times, so they've obviously this grouping have completed their pit stops with the 24th to 29th minute, which we are about to end the 29th minute now. We'll say the number 3 is going to be quite close to it, but I think it's about when you come into pit lane rather than out. Saw a driver come into the pit lane in the back, and I believe that was the track-focused car. No, because Tom Walpole's already in the pit lane. I think it might be the GTH, sorry, of the Forsetti Motorsports car. It was definitely black that came into the pit lane because Group 2 are now able to come into the pit lane because we're in the 29th to 35th minute of this race. So until 15 minutes left to go in this race, we'll be dealing with those drivers working their way into the pit lane. I do believe once everything is settled and sorted, I think it will be the Porsche, the Jennings Caton Porsche, that will be leading the way in that number 33 GCAT racing car. I think they are the ones that are in the prime positions to retake it over, which would leave this then to be the battle for either 2nd or 3rd. Again, we're not 100% sure because we need to work out where the number 3 is going to come out in relation to all this, whether it's behind or ahead. There is the GTH car into the pit lane. Of course, that one just having a slight changeover. Of course, that is the K and Ridge car. That's the BMW that's a couple of laps down at the moment for the Simpson Motorsport car. So just switching over comfortably as they cross the line. Let's see then what battle we've got on the screen. It's the number 2 that we're looking at here. So it'll be the battle for 2nd position, I believe, once everyone's come into the pit lane. So the battle for 2nd at the moment between, it'll be Tom Rawlings, who's behind the wheel at the moment, trying to keep at bay the number 28. I did say it was David Bradham behind the wheel in the first, and I didn't catch who jumped in to the car. So it might have been David Bradham now and Paul Bailey in the previous stint. Again, I don't know exactly which way round they are. All I know is they are most certainly attacking for 2nd position on the road. The number 3 that won the race earlier on in the day is much further down the order. Our race leaders will become that number 33 Porsche 911 GT3 car. But let's see if there's going to be a switch for position here. Straight to the outside comes the Kendall car, the Kendall Developments car, and straight through into what will become 2nd position in this race. Superb move, as we'll get the confirmation once they've come round to complete this lap as to the positions that they're in. Race leader, the number 33, 2-time winners at the Donington Park circuit this year. Again, that was both the endurance races earlier on in the campaign, and they're looking to take a 3rd victory in the endurance races here at Donington Park. Of course, plenty of good results elsewhere, but alas, they're in solid position to take this one. 18 minutes left to go. What is the gap? They've just set the fastest lap of the race as Jennings and Caton as well. Again, not sure as to which driver's behind the wheel. They're leading by 34 seconds. So, courtesy of how they've entered, obviously not taking any pro driver and anything like that. So they've got that short pit stop. They are absolutely flying. You can see there, 1:28.334 at the moment. That was absolutely rapid. And considering it's basically will be your first lap behind the wheel, that is incredibly quick. However, this lap going 8,000 a second faster in the first sector is that Lamborghini of the 28 at the moment that is currently sat in second position. The Kendall Developments car that's chasing them down. Got a little bit of lap traffic at the moment in the Simpsons Motorsports BMW. Just working their way through and part of that GTH category. That will slow the 28 down a fair amount. I've just seen that Jennings and Caton, by the way, they've just gone by my commentary box. They're back in pit lane. They got a 7.9 second stop and go penalty for a short pit stop. There they are back in pit lane by race control. So they've had to come into pit lane to slow down, and they've got a 7.9 second stop and hold, which the marshals are giving. Now they're rolling out pit lane. We could have a tight battle for the race lead now, as we'll see the 28. You can see it in the background, closing down just as it sets. Not quite the fastest lap of the race, but a 29.006. We could have a fight for the race lead now. But of course, as much as they had a 20-second shorter stop, it would be 25 seconds shorter stop, I believe, than the number 28 behind them. To have to come back into the pit lane and serve a penalty for a short pit stop, that'll be very frustrating indeed for the GCAT racing car. As there comes the move to the inside for the number 3. They're currently running in 4th position at the moment, the race winners of earlier on in the day. Of course, the Top Cats racing car that at the moment just working past some of that lap traffic. We've got one car out of the race, which obviously was Chamberlain. I was a bit earlier on in the race, and then one car a lap down, or a few laps down, which is that the Simpsons Motorsport GTH car at the moment. They are running a few laps down. The final pit stop window is about to come to a close, but everyone's been into the pit lane anyway, so it doesn't matter. But 15 minutes left to go. There is your race leader. We'll get a good note as to how close things are once we come round to the start-finish line. Once again, fastest first sector of the race comes in from this Lamborghini here, the number 28. At the moment, Kendall Development's not going to be close enough to go on the attack for the final stage of the race. Fastest final sector came in, and by 0.6 of a second it was faster. And that, of course, was in the hands of our race leaders. So they are, despite losing all of that time and despite only being 6.4 seconds clear, they are going very quickly. There's the fastest lap of the race that they set a few laps ago. Let's see if they go any quicker this time by. Once again, stepping it up in that first sector. The number 28 Kendall Developments car, 6.4 seconds off the race lead. Just set a personal best lap of the race. That personal best lap was still 0.6 slower than this car's personal best itself. So might be a little bit too far to try and close down on the Porsche that heads the field as we head down into the foggy ashes. It'll be a very intriguing lap time. Second sector comes in, fastest second sector of the race for the number 33 GCAT racing car of Jennings and Caton. And it is 0.3 faster than the Bailey and Brabham driven Kendall Developments car directly behind. It is a very impressive run at the moment from this Porsche, looking for yet another victory into the braking zone at the final corner. The 33 looked decent in the sprint race earlier on in the day and looked strong earlier on in this race indeed, but couldn't quite mount a challenge on the number 2 that was leading. Now is certainly mounting a challenge on everyone as it throws down the gauntlet once more across the line. Sets the fastest lap of the race by an eye-watering, my goodness me, an eye-watering, hear this, 1.6 seconds. Wow. It was a 1:28.933 for this Lamborghini here, and you can see it in the bottom right of your screen. I had to wait and double read that. 27.366, 1.6 seconds faster. Absolutely unreal. The 33 has really started to run away. I said they were throwing down the gauntlet, but that's crazy. 13 minutes left to go in the race. not long in what has been a fantastic day of racing in GT Cup. Again, we've had some tight margins, some great battles in both the sprint and here in the pit stop race. We'll have to deal with it all over again tomorrow when we'll have the pit stop race first, which will be at 13:10, so a bit later on in the day, so in the early stages of the afternoon. And then, of course, we'll have the sprint race to end things for us. That will be starting at 5:10 tomorrow. But, of course, still with 12 minutes left to go in this one. Still a lot of focus from the drivers on this race. Kind of one of those ones where, you know, when you've been a driver in the race and you've jumped out of the car, you're thinking, oh, what do I do now? Because there's always that thing of drivers are a little bit, they're control freaks, right? They like to be in control. They like to basically, they want to be the one behind the wheel for obvious reasons. And when they're not in that control, it can be quite frustrating and quite difficult for them, as you're just sat back. You just have to have that full trust in your teammates. They've got what it takes to get the job done. Obviously, whilst we look at this battle, let's say a battle, it's more just of a domination at the moment at the front of the field. It's not the only battle on the circuit. Fastest first sector came in the hands of this Lamborghini, but the fastest lap in the previous one was 1.2 seconds quicker than it still. Just shows how good the GCAT racing car is in that second and third sector. Particularly the third sector is where they pull out the largest margin. Battle for the GT8 lead. It is now the McLaren Artura that is leading in that given category. As the Aston Martin Vantage, the Nessa Porter-driven Fassetti car, has to settle at the moment for second position. It looks like it might well be that way until the end of the race, because, to be perfectly honest, the gap's only coming down by a couple of tenths here and there. I'll roll you through the order with 10 minutes left to go. Of course, it is the number 33 GCAT racing car of Jennings and Catton that lead the way. It's the 28 of Kendall Developments, Bailey and Brabham, that sit in second position before we get the two Top Cats racing cars. It's the number 2 of Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings that are in third position at the moment, and it is the number 3 car that is in fourth position. So our points leaders in the overall category currently sat in third position, but still at the lead of the GTC category, so it's all solid on that one. Then in fifth position, we've got the Tom Walpole track-focused KTM that's rounding out the top 5 in the overall. Not too far, well, I say a fairly comfortable distance ahead of Chris Murphy in the number 72 BMW M3 GTR. Then we've got Keith Bush in the GTC category in 7th position in that Porsche 911 GT3 Team Parker racing car. Before we get there is a track-focused car rolling its way down the quick. That's a lot of fun to chuck through there. You know, such a low and light car. In 8th and 9th position is the top of the GT8 category. Orant and Plowman's McLaren Artura for the Paddock Motorsports car. That is in 8th position. And then it's the Nessa and Porter Aston Martin Vantage that is, of course, hanging on to 9th position, the number 9 Forsetti Motorsports car. Then we've got this car here, which is currently sat third in the GT8 class, third of 3. 10th place overall, the last running car on the circuit. That was the number 21 Simpson Motorsports car, as we saw Chris Murphy work his way through. So a few struggles for this car this weekend, maybe struggling for speed, but still having a whale of a time taking on the twists and turns and troubles of the Donington Park circuit. Certainly is one that you can enjoy driving, whether you're quick or slow or whatever. It really doesn't matter around here whether you're on pace or not this on a given weekend. If you're behind the wheel and chucking it around here, it is a lot of fun. It certainly is not a boring track. There are some which yeah, some drivers may not like too much. I know I've spoke to a few drivers who aren't particularly fond of somewhere like Silverstone. They get a little, as much as you've got Magnus Beckers and Chapel in GT cars, can sometimes be a little bit lethargic going through there. Donington Park, Alton, absolutely built for cars like this. I love Alton Park. I can't wait to head there again in the near future. But for right now, the circuit they've got to focus on for the end of the season is, of course, the run at Snetterton, if I remember correctly, for that Snetterton finale in a few weeks' time. One that some drivers may not like too much. I think it's got a good run, especially around the likes of Coram, Bombhole and the likes around there. It certainly is Snetterton on the 5th and 6th of October. It's a good run. I will say I prefer Donington Park. Always had a good run around here. This is is this a battle? Yeah, it is actually a battle. It's Keith Bush, 7th position at the moment, about to lose 7th position at the moment because the move to the inside sees the Paddock Motorsports McLaren Artura work its way now up into 7th position. Still the GTH leader, of course, but they're being closed down. You see that Aston Martin just work its way through McLaren's in the background. That is 2nd at the moment in the, there it is, just going over Coppice. That is the driver and team that is 2nd in that GTH category. There's your race leader working its way through in that white and blue Porsche. And there's the lights flashing on the number 9. You can tell that they're hungry for victory in the GTH category, chucking it over the curves every which way. I will say, when it comes to the overall standings, that Forseti car, whoa, straight around the outside. That was not what I was expecting. I was looking at the standings and absolutely sent it in. That's crazy. Excellent move there for the Forseti car that moves up now an extra position overall, so up to 8th position overall. But of course, still 2nd in class. And the overall standings, which is kind of based on what you're doing in class as well. At the moment, that Forseti car might be taking over 2nd position in the standings. Currently sits 45 points off the race lead, just 12 off the Ian Logie and Richard Neary ABBA racing car. So there could be a switch for 2nd in the overall standings. That is really across all of the categories here in GT Cup, and effectively you might say, oh yeah, but some classes have more cars than others. For example, you've got the GT3 class here, which has just 1 car. How's that fair? Because they're guaranteed points. That's true, but the more cars you have in your class, the more points you score. Effectively, there is there's not a formula. It is a formula, but it's nice and simple as to how many starters you have. So this car here, the 33, is only gaining 15 points because there's only 1 starter in the group. Whereas if you're in, say for example, the GTH category, there's 3 starters in that group. So 3rd position in that group is 15 points. A race victory in that group is 25. So it's you gain by being in a larger group, and that's why that's kind of why you want to be in the larger groups. But also, if you're hunting down the championship, it's still kind of one of those interesting ones to see how you fight through a championship, even though you're battling in different classes than those you're fighting with. I think it's a fascinating thing rather than just overall positions. 4 minutes and 40 seconds left to go in this race then, so certainly not long, with the pace being set by our race leaders, having dropped off by 1.3 seconds from where they were earlier on. It does seem as though, based on where we are on the circuit, we might actually end up getting another 4 laps from this, because the pace is still plenty quick enough. And it should be 4 laps from this point to see the checkered flag. So still lots of time for these drivers to battle for position. There is a driver and team that really don't want this to be 4 more laps, but they're going to have to deal with it. Of course, that's the race leaders in the GTH category, Orant and Plowman at the moment, who head the GTH field with 7th position on the road at the moment. Indicating that, I can kind of understand that. Was indicating right. I think that's more because this is the whole thing with indicating in race cars and stuff. This is why you always should be predictable rather than requiring communication, because you should be communicating by being predictable. Was indicating right, but then was staying left. I think that's more because they were saying go right. You should go on that side. But if you're indicating, you're saying what you're doing. So maybe a little bit confusing there, and almost an instant between them. But that's fine. Again, the easiest way to be as a back marker, always in the field. It's not that I should be teaching anyone anything. I only know this from experience of being sat up here in a lovely commentary booth and chatting about it, is remain predictable. So stick on the racing line. It sounds counterintuitive because you always think, yeah, but that's not very nice, is it? If you're a GT4 or GT8 rather, that's just sat on the racing line, forcing the GT3s, GTCs, and GTOs to go around the outside. But that is their job. That is what they do. They, as the higher category, it's up to them to make the move cleanly. And avoid the incidents. You know, that's up to them, and you'll see it all the time. They'll just say that the best thing you can do is just stay on the racing line, because at least there they know what you're going to do next. Whereas when you're kind of off it and you're hovering in the middle of the road, you just never really know what's going to happen next. It's all a little bit frantic and concerning. 2 laps left to go then, as we head into the final complex of the corners. 2 laps once we've crossed the line, courtesy of the margin that this car has. It nearly set the fastest lap of the previous lap, by the way. It's 27.087 as the fastest lap of the race. Set a 27.151 on the previous lap, did this car. And it does look as though it is going to be yet another victory for the number 33. But of course, when it comes to races here at Donington Park, it'll be a 3rd feature race, or 3rd endurance race victory rather, for them at Donington Park from 3 this year. When they won earlier on in the year, of course, the GCAT racing car was able to beat the ABBA racing car of Loggy and Neary, and also the Kendall Developments car of Bailey and Brabham that were on the podium in the first race of the endurances earlier on in the year. And then in the second of the endurance races, they were able to beat the National Motorsport car of Jay Shepherd and the Top Cats racing car, the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings car that ended up in 3rd. They're running in 3rd position again. So they'll be sharing that podium once more. So at least there is that, as we are seeing a close battle for what will be 3rd position and the final spot on the podium, because Tom Rawlings has been closed in by the teammate Lamborghini Super Trofeo of the Top Cats racing team. The number 9, which is the Nessa and Porter Aston Martin GT4, has been given a driving standards flag from the race direction. So the only penalty this race has been the short pit stop. I think that the driving standards flag will be probably for track limits. There was a warning for track limits, so probably something in that vein. We haven't seen anything else it really could be. There's the track-focused KTM, the number 13 of Tom Walpole. And somewhere coming through, there's your race leader. Final lap of the race for the Jennings and Caton driven GCAT racing car. Set to take another victory here in the GT Cup Championship, leading by 13.9 seconds, despite having to come into the pit lane and, of course, serve a penalty for a short pit stop, which is a bit of an odd one, but that's fine. Clearly someone's stopwatch wasn't working too well on this Saturday afternoon, despite the beautiful weather. This is the fight for 6th position, and it is getting quite tight. It's Chris Murphy trying to keep the Paddock Motorsports car at bay. They've got the number 2 and the number 3 Lamborghini Super Trofeos to try and pass for Top Cats Racing. And it'll be the number 2 that will clear the Paddock Motorsports car very quickly. And now we'll get past Chris Murphy's number 72. Will the number 3 follow as we get to the crest of the hill? No, they won't. It has to settle just behind. A little bit delayed on time. Final corner then. And for the 3rd time this year at Donington Park, and yet another victory on the season for the GT Cup category. It will, of course, be GCAT Racing taking victory here at Donington Park. The first endurance race of the weekend, a long 14-second wait until we'll see 2nd place round the final corner. Bailey and Brabham will cross the line for the Kendall Developments car to take 2nd place, and then we'll have this battle for 3rd. Bit of a flash of the lights there, I think, from the number 3, basically to say, don't worry about it, we're rolling across the line, you're battling for the championship, let's just take it this way. It'll be a victory in the GTC category still, but of course 3rd position overall for the number 2 and for the overall points leaders. They'll lead their teammate across the line in 3rd and 4th. Then we'll have Tom Walpole across the line in the KTM. Not too long after that, but still a lap down, so fair play on that one. And of course, we saw Chris Murphy across the line, just 0.2 of a second ahead of the McLaren Artura to keep the Paddock Motorsports Club car at bay for 7th position. 8th was Nessa and Porter. Keith Bush in 9th position, with the K Ridge car finishing a few laps down, unfortunately, for the Simpson Motorsports car. And then, of course, we have Chamberlain, who retired from the race. And, of course, Williams and Ingram, who didn't even make it to the start. There is your race winner, though. Great looking Porsche. Love the livery on it. And love the sound. And love the way they drive. That was absolutely superb for the number 33. Flying away. Of course, when it comes to the overall standings, they're not going to score too many points, because they can't really, because they can only score 15. Because they're the only car in the GT3 category. But a superb afternoon of racing from them sees them take the victory by a comfortable margin. We'll take a look at the provisional results then. So, the number 33 car, the GCAT Racing team, will win the race. Jennings and Catton behind the wheel, up at the top. Then it's the Bailey and Brabham-driven Kendall Developments car that's in 2nd position, before we get the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings number 2, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo for Top Cats Racing, leading their teammates across the line in 3rd and 4th. Tom Walpole in 5th position, of course, with 6th place going the way of the Woodrow Motorsports car. Chris Murphy, of course, behind the wheel. Then we'll have Paddock Motorsports, the 11, taking the victory in the GT8 category, as well as 7th overall, just ahead of the Nessa and Porter driven Fossetti Motorsports car in 8th position. Keith Bush in the 75 Team Parker Racing car in 9th. And then, of course, we'll have the Simpson Motorsports team, obviously 3rd in the GT8 category, 5 laps down, but still, you know, obviously 3rd of 3 in that category. Chamberlain retiring from the race after getting a little bit ambitious with the brakes coming down into turn 1. There might have been a bit of a problem on the car as well, but still, it was an excellent performance, at least in the early stages, to put on quite the show. And of course, unfortunately for the 370 Jolt Racing car, it will indeed be a Saturday with no racing from them. We'll hope to see them out in action tomorrow afternoon when we go racing. Obviously, straight away, some communications once they've all jumped out of the car. This will be up and down the paddock. There'll be many a conversation. But that is our race winner. Again, Jennings and Catton. That's Catton, of course. And an excellent drive from the pair of them. A dominant performance through the race. And there is the steed that took them up to the victory. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow at 13:10 here, as we'll get ready for more racing at Donington Park. 2 races tomorrow. We'll be starting with the endurance race, so we'll see you then just past 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.